Hey everyone, welcome. It's Lisa with the Conquered for Me podcast, and we are going to be giving some updates in news bridging the gap between abuse and addiction and systems with awareness, education, and advocacy. I wanted to give updates on news in the House Bill 1309. This passed, which means Colorado is on its way to better protecting survivors. It has been a very long time and reform, and not only the criminal side, but also the civil side for victims of a crime in a domestic relationship. So, moving forward, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, to checking out my lives, and just like getting involved with what I'm doing and bridging the gap between abuse and addiction and now systems. And I want to thank you for being here. So let's go ahead and look at what House Bill 261309 actually does. There has been discussion surrounding this legislation that survivors, parents, and community members are still trying to understand what changes this bill. And it makes changes inside family court proceedings, and that is the huge thing. The bill is titled Abuse in Cases of Separation, and it focuses on how courts evaluate domestic violence, child abuse, neglect, and sexual assault allegations during custody and parent responsibility cases, because we no longer say allocation of parental rights. We say parental responsibilities. That's a whole other story. Anyways, under current law, courts are required to determine parenting time and decision making responsibilities based on the best interest of the child. But now, with this bill that has passed, we are now going to be moving forward in a better reform for survivors of domestic violence. What this bill does is it clarifies on how the courts evaluate evidence involving abuse allegations during those proceedings. The bill states that courts may consider any relevant and hold on, let me get this out of here. Any relevant and admissible evidence regarding domestic violence, child abuse, or neglect, or sexual assault that resulted in that conception of a child. The court must then make findings on the record using the preponderance of evidence standard, meaning the court. So sorry, my computer is like messing up. The court determines whether something is more likely than not to have occurred. So, right now, currently, there is no Victims' Rights Act in civil family proceedings. There is the general, like your victims' rights at the federal level. In the cities, when it comes to not having a domestic violence, being a victim of domestic violence or a victim of a crime, the Victims' Rights Act is harder to apply because it's a bill that was addressed in courts to apply. Um, so this bill is going to help this civil side of family courts, because a lot of the time, even though there are laws passed, we like Caden's law, best interest of the child, we see the cohesive control, the prolonged divorce and custody disputes with inevitably led to fatalities, just like Tyler's case back in Douglas County in 2019. Something is more likely than not to have occurred. The court has to determine whether the domestic violence did result in the change of custody for the child. And that's my baby right there. So, one of the most significant changes involves the mutual decision making responsibilities. If the court finds by the preponderance of the evidence that domestic violence occurred, the bill clarifies that shared decision making responsibility is not considered in the best interest of the child unless there is credible evidence that both parties can cooperate without coercion, intimidation, retaliation, or risk to harm the abused party or the child. Another major area addressed in the bill involves situations where children resist contact with the parent accused of abuse. Under prior law, courts order that remediation efforts is a mental health is mental health. It was verified as a professional that this was in the best interest of the child. Well, now there's with this bill determining that no, unless another professional verifies that the accused party's behavior is not domestic violence or abuse. So there's obviously so much gray area, but at the same time, this is a huge win for this, because the state of Colorado has been working towards reform for a very long time. And we have not seen as much of the enforcement in the courts as we should have. And I know there's so much talk about what's going on in other states, like parental alienation, the child kidnappings. Well, here in Colorado, the numbers show that the domestic violence rates are through the roof, and the child fatality rates have also skyrocketed due to the gray areas in courts and not having the enforcement of the legislative bills in the courtroom. And so HB 2639 changes that framework significantly. Before remediation efforts move forward, the accused party must demonstrate genuine accountability, sustain behavioral change, comply with court ordered therapy, and complete, obviously, the domestic violence abuser intervention program. And it increases the expectation that treatment providers involved have specialized education and expertise regarding domestic violence and survivor impacts. And so this is one of the biggest things. So the DVOMB is meant to help keep individuals out of the prisons, out of the jails. It's a 52-week well, it's supposed to be a 52-week program based off of the level. There's level A, level B, level C. And so the DVOMB, their numbers, which that's a whole other live I'm going to have because I have their whole report, have not gotten any better. And there has been, so they have victim advocates and the DVOMB that are supposed to work with the victims, but the problem is that there's not enough, there's so much gap, there's so much gray area between like probation, the DVOMB, and then reporting back to the courts. And then on top of that, we had recently moved out of municipal courts for domestic violence offenses, but now we're in judicial court, like, well, in the 18th judicial court, and so there was there was no communication. So if there was a family court proceeding, they were not going to know about what was going on. Like, the judge does not know what's going on in the municipal courts. The judge does not see the criminal side of things unless it is presented in a properly manner. There is so much of the gray area to cover, but anyways, getting back to the point here. So this is a huge win. I'm super excited about it because Conquer for Me Limited started because as a survivor of domestic violence and helping other survivors of domestic violence, seeing that where it began, where some of the root is legislative, but then past that is the enforcement part. And so we have seen it time and time again that there are bills that are passed and there's laws that are made, and then once again it's not enforced in the courts. But at Conquer for Me Limited, we believe that legislation alone is only one part of that conversation, and we have seen it where courts are not enforcing the statutes because survivors across Colorado continue reporting concerns as the CPS cases, as well with the fatalities that are happening. So Conquer for Me Limited had drafted a bill back in June 2025. We had took it to the Title Board Initiative, and then we needed to revamp, reword, all the things. And then in November, Conquer for Me Limited established a board, and now we have been working, watching the research and data across the DVOMB, CPS, the RFEs, the new bills that are being passed, and seeing what is happening. And so we created the FCR, which is the Family Court Review Act, and then after that comes the Family Court Enforcement Accountability Act. And so what it really is that it's going to give data. It's going to give data, and it's going to provide the numbers and the research. Okay, are RFEs going down? Are CPS cases? Because so when we look at CPS cases and you see like, okay, domestic violence, custody disputes, divorce, you see all this stuff when you make a child abuse report, when like the person who is reporting is the victim or the offender, either when it's the parties reporting. So on top of this, we are going to enact this Family Court Review Act and the Family Court Enforcement and Accountability Act. And so we're going to, in June, before June, we're gonna hold a fundraiser to get everybody together, try to get anyone involved who has had a prolonged family court case, get their intake on their story as well, if they want their voice to be heard on what happened with them. Currently, the RFEs are still sitting over 1,000 in the 18th Judicial District, and the Judicial Commission will tell you that they can't really do much. It doesn't change the judge's decision, but they just evaluate their compliance and how their manner, right? Like if the judge was drunk on the stand or like called you a name or did something, honestly, speaking to them, so having two of these cases, it has not gone anywhere. And I think a lot of that is because of the fact there is no data. You have to really go back in time. And so what the Family Court Review Act would be is so that you don't have to go back in time and pull this transcript and then try to figure out what happened in that case. Just really right there in the moment, understand, okay, this was a rights violation or this was a bias. The disabilities rights, like so many times I've seen in court where individuals with disabilities are having their rights violated as well with victims of a crime. But then that goes again with the Victims' Right Act is not enforced in civil courts. And so really what Concord for Me Limited in bridges the gap between abuse and addiction and systems is providing the data and being able to look at really what's going on and then structure it to where we cannot be so reactive but more preventative, because you can pass all the bills and do all the trainings in the world, but if nothing's enforced, nothing's going to change. And I know it's been a long time for a lot of people who've been in this work, and I'm so thankful for Meg Froelich, Katie Wallace, Violence Free Colorado, Monica Duran, on the criminal side and the civil side. It's literally like a weave a web, just trying to untangle and making sure that, victims of a crime, whether male or female, because abuse is not gender related, are being treated with respect, dignity, and understood and heard. And that's the whole point. And also children, especially during these cases, because divorce and child custody cases are the worst, especially for the child. So I want to thank you today for tuning in to the Concord for Me Limited. You can go ahead and check out our website at concordformeltd.org. And I actually want to see if I can share it here, because I am new to sharing on live, so give me 1 second. This is like a rough that I did, or a rough draft. This is like a first take I did on this, so I am kind of excited. Hopefully this pulls up. I guess we will see. If it gets disconnected, it gets disconnected. Okay. So anyone who's seeing, this is the Concord for Me Limited site. Here you can see the legislative updates. So if you just go through this, we will have all the updates, all the revisions that's going on in the Senate and in the House, and also as well with who we're sponsoring. So we just also work in Florida. We're starting to work in South Carolina, Virginia, all over. We are not just in Colorado, but yes, we are based out in Colorado, so that's where we began bridging the gap. We have a partnership in supporting survivors with G. Gerald's Closet, and we will be there for the She Is Volume 1 Meet the Authors, and that's going to be coming out. So if you scroll down, you can see our events, and this weekend we will actually be at the Douglas County 11th Annual Law Enforcement. I will be speaking in regards to what Concord for Me Limited is and what Bridging the Gap is.